announcing the arrival of Professor Dr. Cik Ruhana Isa, Dean of Faculty of Business and Accountancy, and the man of the hour, Professor Dr. Ghazali Musa. To bless this session, I welcome Dr. Idil to recite a dua.
للنبي الكريم وآله وأصحابه الكرام الفاتحة. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم اجعل هذا جمعنا جمعا مرحوما وتفرقنا من بعده تفرقا معصوما. Ya Allah, Tuhan yang Maha Agung lagi Maha Bijaksana, di pagi yang berbahagia ini kami menadah tangan memohon kepadamu agar engkau berkati majlis syarahan perdana Profesor kami, Profesor Ghazali Musa. Jadikanlah majlis ini majlis yang bermanfaat buat kami. Didoakan juga agar Profesor Ghazali diberi kesihatan yang baik dan kecemerlangan yang berterusan agar dapat berkongsi ilmu beliau dengan kami khususnya dan semua masyarakat amnya. Jadikanlah segala kelebihan dan kebaikan yang akan kami perolehi dalam majlis ini kami sandarkan kepada kebesaran-Mu ya Allah. Rabbana atina fid dunya hasanah wa fil akhirati hasanatan wa qina adzabannar. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wasallam. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.
Thank you, Dr. Idil. With great pleasure, I would like to invite our Dean, Professor Dr. Cik Ruhana Isa, to introduce Professor Dr. Ghazali Musa.
Professor Ghazali was born on 14th of April 1966 in Kampung Pengkalan Berangan, Marang, Terengganu. He received his early education in Marang, Terengganu and College Islam Kelang, Selangor. He studied medicine at the University of Malaya and graduated in 1991, following which he practiced medicine for 5 years in Terengganu, Sabah, and University Malaya Medical Center. In 1995, he received training in orthopedic and sports rehabilitation at Tan Tock Seng Hospital, Singapore. In 1997, he resigned from his medical career and went to New Zealand to study geography and tourism management. He received his PhD in tourism management from Otago University in 2002. Ghazali joined the Faculty of Business and Accountancy, University of Malaya in 2003. In 2012, he was promoted to a full professor by the university. His area of expertise is tourism management, especially in medical tourism, mountaineering tourism, scuba diving tourism, backpacking tourism, Malaysia, my second home, and sustainable tourism, among others. During the 14 years of his tenure with the University of Malaya, he has produced more than 100 publications, which include 8 books, 19 book chapters, and 50 journal articles. 20 of his journal manuscripts have been published in Tier 1 ISI journals. 10 of his publications are in tourism management, which is the world's #1 tourism journal with an impact factor of 4.7. He is active in carrying out both academic and consultancy research and has received a total in accumulative conferences, accumulative research funding of over 2 million ringgit. Professor Ghazali has been giving keynote addresses at conferences both nationally and internationally in tourism management. He is often either in the editorial board or board of advisors to several international journals, among which are Current Issues in Tourism, ASEAN Current Issues in Tourism, Annals of Leisure Research, International Journal of Tourism Cities, and International Journal of Tourism and Travel. Locally, he is in the editorial board of ASEAN Journal of Business and Accountancy. This year, he has been appointed as the editor-in-chief for Team Journal of Tourism and Hospitality, a journal founded by Tourism Educators Association of Malaysia. As a tourism scholar, he is currently the most cited researcher in the country. At the faculty level, other than teaching and research work, he is also constantly active in management of the faculty by holding several current and previous posts, such as Deputy Dean of Research and Development, Deputy Dean of Undergraduate Degrees, Head of Department of Marketing, Head of Department of Business Strategy and Policy, Head for Services and Innovation Center, and many others. Professor Ghazali is passionate about travel, nature, adventure, and culture. His passion takes him traveling to over 100 countries. Professor Ghazali has one biological child, a daughter who is 18 this year. However, he has fostered 15 children, of whom 8 are from 7 different countries. His main role to them is mentoring and providing financial support in their studies, and also developing a unique family which is multicultural, multi-ethical, and multi-religious. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I now invite Professor Ghazali to deliver his lecture.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning to all of you. Thank you, Madam Chairman, our beloved Dean, very cool Dean, and amazing leadership. Before I start my lecture today, let me acknowledge some key people who have contributed significantly to my career in this university. First of all, Professor Datuk Anwar Zaini, the Vice Chancellor of University Malaya, 2000 and 2003. When I returned from New Zealand, he had created a job for me at this faculty, and that has been the single most helpful gesture or effort to establish myself in this prestigious university. And the second person I like to acknowledge is Professor Tunku Sara, who introduced me to Professor Anwar Zaini. And there are 2 research collaborators, the most active one with me. These are Dr. Tina Rengini and Dr. Sadige. So they have been publishing a lot with me. If you see my publication list, their names are likely to be attached to my name. So I value very much. My proofreader, my friend, Nicola Jane Smith, excellent proofreader who is currently proofreading all my recent publication. last but not least, my children, two of them are here today, Zara and Is, of all my 16 children. Um, let me start the lecture. I will start with this: trust in dream, for in them is hidden the gate to eternity. So when I was young, perhaps this is the most influential writer during my primary school, because she allowed me to explore in my mind, travel in my mind, and inspired me to explore outside my own village. And from inspired by her, I actually have traveled to over 100 countries now for various reasons. And for cultural reason, for conference, for sports, but the most passionate of all for me is adventurous activities. So I like to share some of the activities here in slide. Like this is my hitchhiking in the Middle East, my cycling in Tibet, Trans-Siberian Railway trips from Scandinavia to China. And this is Trans-Canadian trips. And this is this picture I purposely put here, actually just a minute before I fractured my left foot. And when I came back, I consulted Professor Tunku Sara to get MC, etc. And I also explored my mind internally by getting involved in Vipassana meditation, surfboard, bungee jumping with my daughter, water rafting, skydiving, skiing, snowboarding, sailing. And this is my second most passionate activity, scuba diving. I'm the PhD dive master, so I have been diving for over 25 years. But lately, I started again swimming, open water swimming. I was the University Malaya swimmer when I was young, like in the 20s. Stopped, but I started again open water swimming as for me as an adventure sport. So this event was just last weekend, 16 kilometers around Perhentian Island, where I managed to get to the podium. I'm number 4. And the time, thank you. And the time I clocked was 5 hours, 14 minutes at swimming around Perhentian Island. And 5 hours, 14 minutes is what is needed for me to drive from Kuala Lumpur to my village in Kuala Terengganu. And when I get to my village, I constantly reminded in front of my house the activity that I passionate most, which is mountaineering. And my passion start here. I try to trace back my memory why I like mountaineering so much. And I remember that when I was 5 to 6 years old, my mom, while enjoying my mother's lap, my mom told me the story about this mountain. She said, one day my father took me to climb this mountain. And we climbed so high, we could even see the peak. After 2 to 3 hours climbing this mountain, we get to a small waterfall. The waterfall was so beautiful. And there was a pond with clear water, lots of beautiful fishes in it. And she said, my father said, please play here. I'm going to go for fruit picking. But make sure you don't sleep. You just enjoy yourself on this rock. So my mother said she played for quite a while, and the father went for quite long. And she got exhausted and went to sleep on the rock. And suddenly someone tapped on her shoulder.
And when she opened her eyes, she saw this the most beautiful princess on the rock. And the princess, the most beautiful lady she had ever seen, wearing the best dress, the nicest dress, also the most beautiful jewelries. And the princess was so nice. She talked to me, we sing together, and she said when she sing, the birds came singing with her, and the animal came listening. Almost sounds like Disney movie, you know, but that's my mother's story. And after that, suddenly I heard my father is coming. And I rushed to my father, and I wanted to tell the story. And when I get my father to the waterfall, the princess was nowhere to be seen. And I tried to convince my father. My father said I was having some kind of illusion. And when I've been asking him to take me back to this mountain for several years, but my father never would take me again. And this story somehow has inspired me to explore this mountain. I want to see the waterfall. I want to see the birds, the animals, and probably I want to see the princess, if possible. And that has inspired me to climb this mountain. So I've been climbing since from 5 years old to 7, 3 times of this mountain from different direction, and managed to get to the top. But I didn't see anything of my mother's story. Only thick primary forest, no waterfall, only small stream. But that has not diminished my interest toward exploring further the mountain. So when I left the village, I start exploring other mountains. For example, I climbed Mount Kinabalu when I was 19 years old, alone. And I climbed several other mountains in Africa, in Japan, in the Philippines, in the Alps, in New Zealand, many mountains, just to experience what my mother told me, that the mountain's beautiful. Even when I decided to study my PhD in New Zealand, I chose to study the health consequences of visiting high altitude environment. A case study of Sagarmatha National Park, which is Everest region, and Tibet. Why? It's actually totally designed for me to enjoy these mountains and enjoy mountain culture. So I spent a year collecting data in the Himalaya and Tibet. And today, what I'd like to talk about is about mountaineering tourism. In 2014, I managed to get collaboration from 25 professors from around the world who research in mountaineering tourism. So I published this edited book in 2015, and today you'll listen to the abstract of this book. And the content of this lecture is I will conceptualize mountaineering tourism from this perspective, examine elements and issues in mountaineering tourism, discuss the sustainable mountain tourism management, predict the future of mountaineering, as well as propose some future research that could be carried out in mountaineering tourism. So this lecture conceptualized mountaineering tourism activity from sport adventure perspective. So adapting sport conceptual framework, mountaineering tourism could be seen as a complex interplay of 3 constructs, which are activity, people, and place. And this is the construct of my books, how I put together the 25 chapters within this conceptual framework. And let's have a look at the definition of each construct. The first one is activity, which relate to the geographical, historical, and social development of mountaineering. Second construct is people or mountaineers. These relate to the internal aspect of those who engage in mountaineering activities, such as their motivation, their personality, their satisfaction, and their behavior. And place is a unique destination context relating to hosting of mountaineers that facilitate their climb, impact on the environment and host community, as well as how we manage this impact. So these are the three constructs, and now we are going to look into it one by one. Before that, we formulate the definition of mountaineering tourism. We define mountaineering tourism as activities of mountaineering tourists, their interplay with members of climbing community, and all associated stakeholders, together with associated impact and management at environmental and community levels. Okay, let's have a look at the construct one by one. The first construct is activity. What are the main issues discussed in this book of the activity of mountaineering? There are two types of mountaineers. The first one, dedicated professional climbers. Second one is adventure tourists. I consider myself as adventure tourist and not dedicated mountaineer, dedicated professional climbers, because I do a lot of other adventurous activities too. Mountaineering is just one of my activities. So, dedicated professional climbers, they have experience, they have knowledge, they have technical skill to work, to operate independently on the mountain. They value escapism and they search for authenticity when they climb the mountain. The second group is adventure tourists. I consider myself as adventure tourist. We are often guided. We have a mountain guide. And we value accumulation of social capital. That's why if you check my Facebook, whenever I climb mountains, I always post something on Facebook. That is the example of the accumulation of social capital. So mountaineering becomes a symbolic capital which is accumulated and translated into social and cultural capital. And it creates individual status. So when you climb certain mountain, you feel that your status is different compared to the others. You are climbers now. It doesn't work. How is it? Just a slide. Okay, it's working again. This is the example of dedicated professional climbers. They have technical skill. They could operate independently on the mountain slope. And the second group is adventure tourists. They are often guided. They need good weather, and they need good equipment. And that's this kind of tourists, not only you see in smaller mountains, but this is on the Everest mountain slope. You still can see adventure tourists. Guided mountaineering started in the 19th century because to counter the risk of mountaineering. But later on, this activity is commodified and commercialized to become tourism products and services. And in 1965, the International Federation of Mountain Guide Association was formed in Italy. And their function is to provide internationally recognized training and certification scheme. And they also certified other countries which display sufficient standard in mountaineering activity. Now we move to the second construct, which is people or mountaineers. People here are mountaineers. Why do we climb mountains? This is this story started at the beginning of Industrial Revolution, about 200 or 300 years ago. What happened at that time, lots of people working in the factory, and they lost their individuality. They're just becoming like machine production. So the modern industrial world provide less opportunity for them to express themselves, to perform their individuality, self-expressing action. So they decide to take up mountaineering tourism in order to provide the illusion they could control something uncontrollable. And by producing sense of competence, by displaying that, they expand their sense of self through progressing ever-increasing challenges. So they increase the challenges, and their climbing style become their self-expression. So the more challenges they take, they feel that like they are able to control. They are themselves, or they are individual now. They are no longer a machine. And this aspect, however, is currently threatened by tourism industry with regulation, commercialization, and commodification. More about mountaineers. There are two basic emotions among mountaineers. The first one is joy, and second one is fear. Joy ensures their satisfaction, while fear causes dissatisfaction. For serious mountaineers, risk and fear is not to be avoided. It's something to be accepted, and could provide us a bridge to an incredible self-transformation. If they are able to overcome the risk with whatever competence they have, and they are able to transform themselves to somebody else. And their motivation in climbing move from external motivation, from social motivation, to become more internal. That means they are doing mountain climbing because they like it. They are doing it for self-satisfaction. I mentioned just now that I consider myself as adventure tourist. And for guided mountaineering tourists like me, we normally perform our mountaineering activity within our protective frame. That's the term they use, protective frame. Protective frame consists of mountain guides. We must have good mountain guides, good equipment, other participants that provide our social engagement, because it's important for us to climb with other people too. That's the social aspect. And conducive environment. We must be guided that the weather is right for us now to reach the summit. In my study in Tibet, in Sagarmatha National Park, as well as in Mount Kinabalu, I discovered that mountaineers with high spirituality motivation, or spirituality element, they are less likely to get sick on the mountains, and also they are more likely to behave responsibly on the mountain. So that's one aspect of mountaineers. To illustrate my lecture today, I will show some pictures from my latest expedition, a mountain expedition in the Himalaya. This mountain is Stok Kangri in India, Ladakh. The reason why I climbed this mountain is because it's over 6,000 meters. I never climbed mountain over 6,000 meters. So to go to this mountain, I flew to Delhi and then flew to Leh. Leh is situated at 3,700 meters elevation. That is high altitude. Any elevation which is higher than 2,500, we consider as high altitude elevation. And if we go to this kind of places, the oxygen pressure is very low, and that can cause us to get symptoms of high altitude sickness or mountain sickness. Among symptoms that we will experience something like headache, insomnia, breathlessness, loss of appetite. That's quite common a symptom in high altitude. And the air is rarefied, low pressure oxygen, as well as the sun is very harsh because you are nearer to the sun. And acclimatization will take 12 to 72 hours to get our red blood cell absorb enough oxygen required by the body. And while acclimatizing, we should stay calm. We should not exert ourselves at high altitude. Normally by 48 hours, we should feel better, and 72 hours, we definitely feel better to climb. All right, let's have a look at the third construct, place. The third construct relates to the environments of mountain region, as well as local community who live in the mountain regions. And there are benefits for the mountain communities in terms of increasing employment as well as income opportunity. However, there are sociological challenges for the mountain regions, like increased inexperienced climbers, even on Everest mountain, congestion on the climbing routes, garbage management problem, and safety concern, not only for the local people, but also for the climbers. And lately, we are concerned about global warming, which cause unreliable snow and ice climbing, and high magnitude weather events, not just happening in the coastal areas, but also in high altitude. There are unstable rock faces because of thawed permafrost, and new vector diseases also move up higher because of the global warming. And they say that mosquitoes buzzing at 6,000 meters on Andes Mountain at the moment. And that is how global warming has affected the mosquito where they could live. And there are environmental impacts that can cause pollution to water, soil, vegetation, affect the wildlife, human waste, solid waste, deforestation, that's the issue in the Himalayas, pollution of water sources that cause waterborne diseases, and trampling and erosion of the tracks. So these are the environmental impact on the mountain. Back to the Stok Kangri Mountains, my expedition on the second day, we move up 100 meters higher. We move slowly, 100 meters higher, and rest at Stok Kangri village. And here is another day of acclimatization. So we decided to stay at homestay to provide some economic contributions to the local people. And we eat local food. We don't eat spaghetti or something, because local food, normally you use the freshest ingredient, and that will ensure you not getting sick, especially if you go to this region, Nepal and India. And this is the homestay, Ladakhi people stay here. And we provide employment to the local people, such as portering our equipment, our food, our tent. And there will be some contact between tourists and local people, and the impact could be positive and could be negative. Flora and fauna, these are the flowers that I found during the trek up to the Stok Kangri base camp, and some fauna. And this will be affected if the mountaineering tourism management is not managed properly along Stok Kangri mountain. What about people? They have some report that Sherpa guides in Nepal, in Everest region, taken for granted, underpaid, underinsured, sometimes not insured at all, by mountain expedition. And there was hoo-ha about 2 years ago between the guide and the government about the insufficiency of insurance covered to the mountain guides and to porters by climbing expedition. And sadly, in Mount Kilimanjaro, that's in Tanzania, 10 to 20 porters died every year because they were forced to work under unfavorable circumstances, like they were not given enough food, they were not given enough proper wear. And according to my study, in Tibet and in the Himalayas, Everest regions, the common elements of injuries that I discovered on the mountain is muscular, skeletal, and soft tissue injury, like muscle pain. Infection of upper respiratory tract because of the dryness of the atmosphere that injured mucosa lining of your lung, and that's a cause. And if you get cough in high altitude, to recover is very, very long. It could take like 4 to 6 weeks because of the injury to the lung lining. And diarrhea is quite common because of the pollution to the water source, as well as unhygienic food preparation. And 60 to 7% will experience high altitude sickness. I mentioned about the symptom, headache, insomnia, dizziness, loss of appetite. That's the cardinal symptoms of high altitude sickness. Now, we just finished talking about the issues. The second part is talking about the management of mountaineering tourism. And in my book, I also frame my management based on the 3 important constructs that I introduced. Management of activity, management of people, and management of place. And let's have a look at how we manage the activity. A mountain awareness is very important. It requires adequate training, guiding of mountaineering tourists through various certification and accreditation schemes, and the use of standard safe equipment. And professional guiding practices require support from both international and national mountain guide association. I'm not very sure whether we have a mountain association in Malaysia. And local capacity building, we must try to train local people, train them to guide mountaineering, train them how to provide service to the mountaineers and trekkers, and that will ensure economic contribution, stay in mountain region. And IUCN stress on the limit of using ladders, chains, fixed bolts, for example, unless safety is compromised, because they want to make sure the mountains look like the mountain. Have any one of you been to Mount Kinabalu lately? You can see Mount Kinabalu, the mountain used to look like a mountain, but now not so mountain, full of line, via ferrata, right, on the mountain slope. And that's diminished the wilderness experience that mountaineers could experience. Unless it's really crucial for the safety, that's fine. But putting it for business, we have to review that carefully. And back to Stock Kangri, I have hired experienced mountain leader for my mountain expedition from India. And I mentioned that we need the proper equipment like sunglasses to prevent from glare, as well as snow blindness, especially when we climb to the snowy mountains. And in the snow, we had to climb with a plastic boot. These are some of the equipments that have to be hired and to be made sure. Because sometimes we think we already have perfect equipment, but when we go there, we realize that our equipment is not good enough. Management of people, management of the second construct. mountaineers, how do we manage them? For serious mountaineers, for experts, they climb with internal motivation. So they require pristine and uncrowded environment and continuous challenge to maintain their ideal and expansion self. So this is difficult because you have to make sure that the mountain remains pristine. And for commercially guided mountaineers like me, like most of us, I think when we climb, we are commercially guided. We need to climb within our own protective frame. I mentioned what are the elements of protective frame. We need a mountain guide, efficient mountain guide. We need good equipment, and we need the company of other climbers, and we need good weather, conducive environment. And for us, we value detailed and logistically well-organized itinerary when we climb mountains. So this is what's required for the second group of mountaineers. And mountaineers must always make effort to improve knowledge and skill, and that skill and knowledge could be transferred to the mountaineers themselves, but also indirectly to the mountain guide and porters. And there are also safety requirements like medical access, first aid kit, insurance coverage, and emergency deployment system. These are my protective frame during my climb on Stock Kangaroo. So I have here my expedition leader, very, very experienced expedition leader. And there are 5 horses taking my equipment, tent, food, etc. And this the cook, Sherpa, and the man here is the handle horses. My experienced Sherpa mountain guide, I explain more about him. And this is assistant cook. And this is one of my 7 son who live in India, study political science now in one of the university in New Delhi. And this is naturalist, also come joining my expedition. He's an expert in flora and fauna, as well as the geological formation of Ladakh. So I have a full expedition members who could give me the best input, the best advice, and the best knowledge of mountaineering on Stock Kangaroo. All right, I mentioned that this is very, very important for you to have the right guide. My guide is very experienced. He's a Sherpa, 26 years old, and he had climbed Mount Everest without supplementary of oxygen in 2014. So I have really good backup to help me to get to the mountain. Let's have a look at the management of place, people, mountain environment. So academic, when we review literature, the academic literature say that for mountaineering region, the most important aspect to be managed is the environment, and second is the welfare of local people. However, the priority must be given to the management of environment. So education must be given to trekkers, to expedition members, porters, guides, support staff on the environment, how to be responsible and how to make sure the place is left ecologically intact after climbing expedition. And environmental stewardship and social cultural understanding are required, must involve stakeholders, communities, tourism managers, as well as climbers. And there must be collaboration among them, but the management preferably be led by local people. That means there must be empowerment of local people to manage mountain development. And trail design, there must be effort to use the most up-to-date design, right material to minimize physical impact on the mountain track. These are the impacts on Mount Everest. Some of this left by the climbers, and sometimes climbers also left themselves. They died on the mountain. There are about 20 dead bodies on Mount Everest, not taken down by their relative, and this is quite a sad situation. I mentioned that some people said mountain is the amphitheater of ego, because people who want to climb Mount Everest, normally they have very high ego. They want to be the climbers, the first one. They want to be, all egos are there, and amphitheater of ego. But sooner, if this is not cleared, it will become graveyard of ego. That's my comment during my keynote address in Nepal just a few months back. I think my expedition members behave very well. They follow strictly on the environmental ethic. During my climb, for example, we make sure our camping site away from water source. Yep, to make sure that we won't contaminate the water and cause foodborne diseases. Okay, now the management of the last construct, management of place. Local people should participate in guiding and manage logistical support, retailing equipment, and hospitality. So there's a huge emphasis that local people must be involved, not only international businesses. Because in Nepal, for example, there's a lot of businesses run by European and not by the Nepalese. Government should provide management approaches that address safety hazard, compensation and benefit, permits, pollution with policy that's just, timely, transparent, accountable, and beneficial to all stakeholders without compromising ecology and social integrity of the mountain region. And IUCN said that Mountain Heart, if we develop Mountain Heart, it should be accessible in emergency situation, have up-to-date management system, visitor information, and on alpine hazard, weather route, health advice, and experienced search and rescue personnel. So that's the setup on the mountain itself. And mountaineers must be socially responsible. You must behave properly with the local people, respect local sentiment. For example, if you climb Mount Kinabalu, don't go and pee on the mountain. Like that. That is the socially responsible act. And if you are mountaineering commercial operator, there are some, I think, coming from the industry here. They are operators of mountaineering organization. And this is what you need to do for your staff, especially porters and guide, must ensure they are qualified to an international standard. So we have standard, international standard. Ensure porters are equipped, cared, and paid fairly. In Mount Kilimanjaro, for example, they are not properly paid, they are not properly cared, they were not given food. They have to prepare their own food, traditional food. And ensure proper climbing gear, such as clothing, footwear, proper medical care, insurance coverage, transport, and food. And again, promote ethical approaches to operating mountaineering tourism services. In fact, maybe some of you now thinking of climbing Kilimanjaro, for example. There are lots of companies operating Kilimanjaro climb. And they have their own standard in terms of socially responsible. You have to choose the company which are socially responsible. And that's how we go about now, choosing the company to take us to the mountain. And back to Stock Kangri, it's a third day of my climbing expedition, and we reach the base camp. This is the height of 5,100 meters, and it's about 1,000 meters higher than Mount Kinabalu. And I took Dimox as prophylaxis, as well as walk very, very slowly. So when we get to this base camp, there's no symptom of altitude sickness. I had experience before those, and I know how to prevent it. And my son, I think he was fitter than me. I'm a bit weaker, but it's okay. Still no symptom of mountain sickness. Let's have a look at the future of mountaineering. There's very few slides left. Now is future, and next is research. What is the future of mountaineering tourism? It's look good. That's what we expect. It's expected to continue and to increase because improvement in guiding operators. There are lots of motivational forces of literature, film, media, technology has improved and increased leisure time, as well as commercialization of mountaineering through media and rental equipment stores. So they expect to improve this activity. What about climate change? They say climate change is unlikely to deter the demand for mountaineering. There will be innovative business diversification that will happening, and adaptation in utilizing infrastructure to access the mountain environment. So even with global warming, they think mountaineering will still continue with adaptation. There's also a chance that people will move from the actual climbing itself to armchair experience, like experiencing climbing with virtual reality, etc. So there will be that as the aspect. And the mountain route is likely to be safer. There will be more permanent infrastructure fixed on the mountain to assess more inexperienced climbers to get to the mountain. Back to Stock Kangri Mountains. This is the summit day. It's the longest day of climbing in my life. We started climbing at 12 at midnight. As usual, most of the mountain will ask you to climb at midnight so that you get to the peak sunrise. But when sunrise appeared, I was nowhere at the peak yet. Okay? This is about 5,700 meters. And my son succumbed to altitude sickness because young people tend to be more excited, more confident, so got all the symptoms of mountain sickness, and I advised my expedition leader to take him down. So I continued climbing. I already make agreement with my son. If I get sick, you continue climbing. If you get sick, I continue climbing. We don't have to be too romantic. Let's try to climb this mountain. So I continue climbing. With 2 Sherpas and one expert in nature. And climbing was very slow and arduous. This picture was taken at 5,900 meters, which is the height of Kilimanjaro. And I still remember at this point I was walking. Every 5 steps, I stopped for 5 minutes to breathe. That's every 5 steps. I mean, I walk there and up there. I stop for 5 minutes to breathe and then continue again. But I didn't feel any symptoms of mountain sickness other than difficulty in breathing, which I think is because of low pressure oxygen. So I said, I don't want to give up. I must continue. And the future of research. What kind of research we can do in mountaineering. There are 4 aspects that I lay out here that very, I think very important for researchers to research in the future. One, there should be a continuous monitoring of environmental impact. The impact on of climate change and changing biodiversity in the alpine areas. And research on the management approaches from several geographical regions. And then that management approach could be shared by other geographical regions through this platform, UIAA, IFMGA, IUCN. So you do the research, you share the management, maybe other people can use our knowledge. Second research area that could be explored is exploring mountaineering experience in terms of philosophy, changing values, attitude, and other psychological aspects of mountaineering experience. And the third aspect is to look at media and social media influences, how it changed mountaineers' motivation, satisfaction, and social networking. Nowadays, we are on social media. And the fourth one, very important now, technology is picking up. There should be a study to looking at how technology influence, for example, GPS, smartphone apps, etc. How this technology influence tourist experience, tourist satisfaction, and perception of safety when they climb a mountain. Back to the peak of Mount Stockhanger is very near. You can see that it's actually the peak. But when I was there, it was so far. It was so far to get there because it's still about, I think, 10, 15 minutes to get to the peak. You can see that my mouth constantly open because I cannot close my mouth. I need to get air, you know. And my 2 Sherpas look so relaxed. They don't have any problem with altitude because they are born in high altitude. And conclusion of my lecture is my inaugural lecture addresses detailed perspective of mountaineering tourism from the sport theoretical framework, which has 3 constructs: activity, place, and people. And also, I explain about the management of mountaineering tourism based on these 3 constructs as well. And I mentioned that the mountaineering tourism activity is expected to grow because of the increased knowledge, increased experience, and increase in technological advancement that could take people to the mountain. However, to ensure the sustainability of mountaineering tourism management, these are the aspects that must be in place. One is ethical decision making, experience risk management, appropriate infrastructure for the mountain, enhance workers' rights, entrepreneurial adaptation, that's crucial in the future, especially with global warming, and environmentally sustainable behavior. Back to the Stockhanger, I managed to get to the peak around 8:30 in the morning. And but my advice is if you want to climb mountain in the Himalayas, do employ some Sherpas because they are the mountains. They know exactly how to advise you and how to take you to the peak of the mountain. And I remember before I'm standing here, I was telling my comrades, my mountaineering friends, that I'm never going to climb any other mountain after this because this is very hard climbing. Never again. And I said 5 times, never again. And I even recorded it on my Facebook that I never again going to climb another mountain. And at the moment I get down to Leh and my oxygen level all right, I start thinking about another mountain again. And yes, the latest visit was only last month. I went with my colleague, Dr. Sadige, to Tibet, and we climbed these the mountain, Mount Kailas. Mount Kailas is considered a spiritual mountain in Western Tibet. It's sacred for Hindus, for Buddhists, and for Bon religions. So the trek was about 3 days and took you up to about 5,600 meters. And it's the most profound experience on the mountain I've ever had, even more profound than stock hungry. And after that, I moved to Everest Base Camp from Tibetan side. It's not difficult climbing here. It's also a sacred mountain. But back to my village, this is also my sacred mountain. I visit my mom there very often in the village, and this mountain always there in front of my door. I never want to validate with my mom whether the story that she told me true or simply fabricated to entertain me during that time, you know. So I never want to do that, because for me the story is so real, and it has inspired me, and it has energized me to be who I am, as well as it has shaped even my professional career. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Ghazali. I would like to extend a warmest thank you to everyone that is present today for your time. I would like to invite honored guests for some refreshments at the foyer. And for students, you are invited to have some refreshments in front of DK1. Thank you very much.